Uri, the relationship between free will and moral responsibility, moral judgment, is an important one that generally is approached by philosophers or legal scholars. You're taking a view that you can attack this problem from the standpoint of neuroscience. What is your experiment? What is the design? And what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, first of all, even though we are neuroscientists, we are working here with philosophers and legal scholars. That is the main thrust of our group here. Instead of doing experiments that would be what we think is relevant as neuroscientists, relevant to free will or moral responsibility, we work from the beginning with the philosophers and legal scholars so that at the end, when we say, hey, we got something interesting, they will not just say, look, it's actually not because you haven't considered this, this, and that. So the kinds of questions that we're looking at together are questions of reason. So usually when neuroscientists looked at the question of free will, they had subjects sit there and then told to do something like, whenever you feel like it, press one button with the right hand or another button with the left hand. And they could predict which button the person was going to press even before the person was aware which button they're going to press themselves. These are results from the 80s already, Libet experiments. And what they claimed that this may have some significance for free will, and some have even said this might be relevant for moral responsibility. And then philosophers come and say, no, these are not morally relevant questions. It's meaningless what you're doing here. Moreover, I mean, if by raising one hand you would condemn someone to death and the other hand you would, let them live, okay, we can see why that's relevant or something of that sort, but not the kind of questions that you're asking here. And more than that, they said all these predictions, all this idea that you can predict what the person is going to do is usually in most moral situations is not maybe the most important element. Sometimes the more predictable is actually less interesting. I'll try to give you an example. Let's say that two people are set to commit a very similar crime, some kind of a violent crime, let's say. And then one of them is this repeated offender. He's been in and out of jails all the time. All his parole officers say he's just gonna do it again. And the other guy is just a normal guy. And so one of them you would predict would probably do it again, right? But we don't say that this guy is more or less morally responsible than the other guy. If anything, then maybe the other guy it was not predictable that he would do it is maybe actually more, we would tend to say maybe there's something wrong with him. Let's try to find a reason here. Maybe there's something in his brain. Maybe he had a psychotic episode. Maybe because he was never violent before. So actually, this idea that if you can predict it, then the guy is not morally responsible anymore. It doesn't really hold water for the people that actually influence what judges decide and what legal scholars think. For us, as I said, we try to look at reasoning, at experiments that look at reasoning processes. So the experiment that we want to do is maybe the following: people contribute to charity. And we want to try and make that real. So we'll let the person decide which charity to contribute. Do you want to contribute to save the dolphins or maybe save the trees or something like that? But there's another facet to this, which is you're going to get some kind of a tax return, but this is going to be an instant tax return. So each charity gives you some money back for your contribution. So what we want to try and see is what happens when these two reasons, two things. One, sometimes these reasons contrast each other, and sometimes you have two reasons to support your decision. And then what happens if we ask you to decide according to one reason? Let's say, now just think about which charity you prefer. Try to forget about, not forget so much, just try to decide only according to the charity that you prefer and not focus on the cashback, if you will. And another time we ask you just to think about the cashback and not about the charity. So it is believed by some philosophers, and others, by the way, don't think so, that this is a capacity that we as humans have, and maybe animals don't have. A cat sees a mouse, knows that it's hungry, recognizes if it catches the mouse, it can eat it, so it goes after the mouse. It doesn't start deliberating, should I do it? What are the other cats going to think about me? And things like that. But we think humans, they can do this. They can deliberate between reasons. So now we give you maybe 2 reasons to support your action. One is you like dolphins better than trees. The other is the cashback is maybe higher. And we say, decide according to one, don't decide according to the other, and let's see what differences this creates in your brain.
And from those differences, you will look to be able to predict? Are you looking at differences before the decision-making process?
In the end, yes. We are also interested in, let's say not so much in predicting, but we would like to see what happens in your brain while you're doing this. So one of the things we have done already, and this is complete already, is we have created this real-time system that analyzes your brain activity while you do it. You can actually even see your brain activity. So we tried this with one of the experiments that I was deriding before about trying to lift your right hand versus the left hand. So I can tell you with about 80% accuracy, half a second before you lift either hand, which hand you're going to lift in real time. And this is, scientifically, it's a nice achievement, but again, the philosophers would say, okay, so what does that tell us about moral responsibility? But the kind of things that I told you about here, they have immediate, both moral and legal concerns that are associated with them.
What are your goals for the experiment? What would you be sitting here 2 years from today saying, great, here's what we accomplished, or here's what I thought we would do, and we were unable to do it because of such and such? What is your predictive sense of what you would like to accomplish?
If we manage to find such differences in the brain between these 2 types of reasoning, between reasoning, let's say, for the trees versus reasoning for the cashback, the question is then, where would we find these differences? Where in the decision process? And we know something about decision processes in the brain already. Where in the decision processing in the brain does this happen? Early, late, just at the very end, just before you make it your mind? Where does this deliberation go on?
Where in a temporal sense? How about where in a geographical sense in the brain?
No, both. I mean, where spatially and temporally. So where does this process take place in the brain, and when do the different components of this process come together? Those are the kind of things that we're trying to understand.